Welcome to RP Revenge.
The first thing I noticed wasn't the sight, it was the sound. A laugh, soft and breathless, floating through the half-open bedroom door like perfume I didn't remember buying. At first, my brain refused to translate it. I stood at the top of the stairs, holding a mug of coffee, steam kissing my fingers. The sound came again, feminine, hushed, coated in intimacy. Then another voice, low and familiar, said, "Sure, she might be home." My body froze before my mind did. The coffee trembled in my hand, a dark ripple breaking the surface. My heart started pounding so violently I could feel it in my teeth. I thought, absurdly, that if I just turned around, if I walked back down the stairs and pretended I'd forgotten something in the car, the world would rearrange itself. I could still be the woman who didn't know. But then the mug slipped. The ceramic shattered on the hardwood with a sound so sharp it sliced through the silence like a scream. The door opened. And there he was, Daniel, half naked, skin flushed, face slack with the kind of guilt that makes you hate yourself for ever loving someone. The duvet we'd bought together hung low on his hips. Beside him, sitting up slowly, hair tangled and lipstick smeared, was Maya. My best friend. My sister in everything but blood. For a long second, I couldn't make a sound. My mind detached from my body, floating above the scene like it belonged to someone else. Daniel's mouth moved, but the words didn't land. "Clara, wait. Don't say my name." It came out low, shaking, unrecognizable. I looked at Maya, who was clutching the sheet to her chest like modesty could undo the damage. Her eyes darted to me and then to the floor. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered. I laughed. God help me, I laughed, a brittle, cracked sound that wasn't laughter at all. "Really? Then maybe you should explain what it is." Daniel reached out. I stepped back. My foot crunched on the broken mug. The pain registered a second later, a shallow slice on my heel, blood pooling fast. I didn't even care. "Get out," I said. "Both of you." He tried to talk. She tried to cry. I didn't listen. I walked past them, past the bed, past the scene that felt like a nightmare wearing the skin of my home. The door slammed behind them, and the echo stayed long after they were gone. When silence finally settled, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the sheets. The wrinkles, the indentations, the smell of sweat and perfume, it was all evidence. Proof of something I'd refused to see. Later, I learned this had been going on for months. Little details started slotting into place. The nights he came home late, smelling faintly of jasmine. The way Maya's texts got shorter, her smiles tighter, the sudden, suffocating weight of my own intuition, which I'd buried under the word trust. Mom always said I was too soft. "You think love means being the last one to stop believing," she told me once, when I was 16 and crying over my first heartbreak. "It doesn't. Love ends when respect does." She was right. She's always right. But when I called her that night, I didn't tell her what happened. I couldn't bear to say the words. Instead, I told her I was coming home for a while. She sighed. "If you'd listened to me about that man, you wouldn't be in this mess." "Please, Mom. Not tonight." Her voice softened just a little. "You'll always have a room here. Just, remember, sometimes people break you to remind you who you are." I didn't know what that meant then. I would, eventually. For weeks, I existed in a fog. I moved through the world like someone underwater, hearing everything muffled and distant. My job at the architecture firm became the only thing I could still control. Drawings. Blueprints. Measurements that didn't lie. Buildings made sense. People didn't. Every night, I'd stay late, staring at the glowing lines on my screen. That's where the idea started. At first, it was just distraction, designing something impossible, something grand. But as I traced the digital walls and staircases, the idea became sharper, angrier, alive. It began as a concept for an exclusive event space, a place for artists, entrepreneurs, and dreamers, a blend of modern glass and Gothic restraint. But beneath that, it was something else. Something personal. Mom had once thrown a dinner party for her charity circle. I was 21. I'd worn a blue dress she'd said was a little too desperate looking. She'd laughed as she whispered to her friend, loud enough for me to hear. She tries too hard. No wonder no one invites her twice. That night, as I left the table early, she called after me, Clara, you'll never be invited again if you act like that. Maybe she was right. Maybe that was the first betrayal. The one that made me think love had to be earned. So I built something no one could deny. I called it Aurelia. It started as sketches on napkins, then floor plans, then renderings that lit up my laptop screen like fever dreams. I poured everything I had into it, the hurt, the humiliation, the rage that pulsed like a second heartbeat. I wanted beauty that burned. I wanted elegance that cut. Aurelia was glass and steel and light. The interior curved like the inside of a seashell, walls rippling with mirrored reflections so subtle that you could see yourself without quite recognizing who you were. I filled it with art installations, handcrafted furniture, and a ceiling that shimmered like constellations. When I finally pitched it to investors, they said it was ambitious, audacious, unrealistic. I smiled and said, so was every woman they underestimated. The irony was, Daniel worked in PR. He knew the city's elite, the tastemakers and the gatekeepers. Once, I would have needed his connections. But now, I didn't need permission. I built my own network, one handshake and one sleepless night at a time. The day Aurelia opened, my mother showed up uninvited. She was wearing her pearls, the ones she saved for weddings and gossip. She looked around, pretending to be unimpressed, but I caught the flicker of awe in her eyes. Well, she said, brushing an imaginary speck from her sleeve, this is quite something. I didn't think you had it in you. I smiled. That makes two of us. She smirked, the same way she did when I was a girl. You really do know how to prove a point. Just don't let it go to your head, darling. If she noticed the way my voice trembled slightly when I thanked her, she didn't say. I'd learned long ago that vulnerability was a language my mother didn't speak. But she was there. And so were hundreds of others, journalists, influencers, art critics, socialites. People who'd never once looked my way before now lined up to take photos in front of the gilded archway, whispering about how visionary the space was. And then, like a final test from the universe, I saw them. Daniel and Maya. They walked in together, laughing, his hand at the small of her back. She wore a pale gold dress, her hair perfectly done. For a moment, my lungs forgot how to work. My mother, standing beside me, noticed my stillness. What is it? She asked. Just ghosts, I said quietly. Her gaze followed mine, and when she saw them, her expression hardened. If I were you, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing they still matter. I swallowed. Oh, they'll know. She smiled then, a slow, satisfied smile that made me wonder, for the first time, whether revenge might run in our blood. When they saw me, their laughter faltered. I could almost taste the shift in the air, the way guilt hums beneath polished civility. Maya froze first, her eyes widening, her painted smile cracking just slightly. Daniel's face followed, that practiced confidence melting into something uncertain, even fearful. I let them come closer. I wanted to see it up close, the discomfort, the confusion, the faint recognition that the woman they'd broken was no longer the one standing before them. Clara, Daniel said, his voice careful, like stepping onto thin ice. You look incredible. This place is unbelievable. I heard it's yours. I tilted my head, pretending to consider. Mostly, though the walls have their own opinions. Maya laughed awkwardly, clutching her champagne flute. It's so beautiful. You must be so proud. Oh, I am, I said. It's funny, though. Every corner here is built from something broken. Glass from discarded windows. Steel from a demolished hotel. I like when things get rebuilt stronger. Don't you? For a moment, none of us spoke. Behind them, the crowd glittered, unaware that something poisonous pulsed in the quiet space between us. Then Daniel smiled, his PR smile, the one that never reached his eyes. You've really come a long way, Clara. I had good teachers, I replied. You taught me what not to settle for. He winced, subtle but visible. Maya looked away. I felt nothing. Or maybe too much, so much that it wrapped around and became nothing again. They drifted off eventually, swallowed by the crowd, and I turned to find my mother watching me. She raised an eyebrow. Satisfied? Not yet, I said. She sighed, but there was amusement in it. Just don't forget, darling, revenge is only satisfying until it starts tasting like regret. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. But the truth was, something inside me already ached. In the weeks that followed, Aurelia became the place everyone wanted to be. Celebrities hosted fundraisers there. Magazines called it the beating heart of the city's new creative class. People begged for invitations, just to post photos beneath its mirrored ceilings. Every night, as I stood in the balcony watching strangers dance under lights I'd designed, I should have felt triumphant. But I didn't. Because they kept coming back. Daniel and Maya. Again and again. Always smiling, always pretending nothing had happened. At first, I thought it was arrogance. Then I realized, it was dependence. They needed to be seen here, to be validated by proximity to what they'd destroyed. So I decided to let them. One evening, I planned an exclusive gala, invitation only, black tie, celebrating rebirth and reinvention. I made sure they received invites with their names printed in gold leaf. I even sent a personal note. It wouldn't be the same without you. The night of the gala, the space glowed like liquid light. Every inch of Aurelia shimmered. Music floated through the air, soft jazz, champagne laughter, camera flashes like little bursts of approval. My staff whispered about how the event had drawn the most influential guests yet. Daniel and Maya arrived fashionably late. She wore emerald silk. He wore a smile that had once made my knees weak. I approached them as photographers turned their way. "Can I get a picture?" one of them asked. "Of course," I said sweetly, slipping between them and looping my arm around Daniel's. "After all, we have history." The flash went off. The photo would later appear on several blogs under headlines like "Exes Reunite at the city's most coveted venue." I made sure of it. Later that night, I took the stage for a short speech. I thanked everyone for coming, for believing in the dream of transformation. I talked about how broken things could become art, about how destruction was sometimes the only way to rebuild something honest. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. And through it all, I kept my eyes on them. Daniel looked pale. Maya clapped too quickly, her eyes darting around like she wanted to disappear. Good. I wanted them to feel small, to remember that I was the architect of their discomfort. When the night ended, I found Daniel on the terrace, alone. The city stretched beneath us, glowing and infinite. For a moment, the silence between us was almost gentle. "I never meant to hurt you," he said finally, his voice low. "It just happened." I turned to him. "Things don't just happen, Daniel. People make choices. You made yours." He looked at me, eyes glassy with some cocktail of guilt and nostalgia. "Do you ever think about what we had?" I smiled faintly. "Only when I need a reminder of how much better I deserve." He laughed softly, but there was sadness in it. "You've changed." "I had to," I said. "You left me no choice." When he reached out to touch my arm, I let him. Just long enough for him to believe I might forgive him. Then I stepped back. "Goodbye, Daniel." That was the last time I spoke to him. Months passed. Aurelia continued to thrive. But success began to feel like a performance I couldn't step out of. Every night, I watched people drink and dance and pretend they weren't lonely. I realized they were all chasing the same thing: validation, admiration, the illusion of being enough. Just like me. Mom called one evening, her voice unusually soft. "I saw your interview," she said. "You looked beautiful. But your eyes looked tired." "I'm fine, Mom." "You don't sound it." I didn't answer. There was a long pause, then she said, "You proved your point. Now maybe you can rest." Rest. I hadn't thought about rest in years. That night, I stayed long after everyone had left. The music had stopped, the lights were dim. The mirrors reflected my face from a dozen angles. each version a little different, a little less certain. I walked through the empty hall, trailing my hand along the glass walls that had once felt like triumph. Now they just felt cold. At the center of the main room stood a sculpture, one I'd commissioned months earlier. Two figures made of shattered mirror, reaching for each other but never touching. Their reflections multiplied endlessly across the room. I stared at them until the lines blurred and I couldn't tell which one was me. When the cleaning staff came in, I left quietly. The city outside was asleep. The air smelled like rain and exhaust. For the first time, I didn't feel powerful. I just felt hollow. A week later, I received an invitation. It was from Maya. Her wedding. To Daniel. I almost laughed at the irony. Again. Same cycle. Same illusion. The invitation came embossed in gold, with a handwritten note at the bottom. I hope we can move past everything. You're welcome to come. For a long time, I stared at that line, "You're welcome to come," and thought about my mother's voice all those years ago, "You'll never be invited again." I didn't go to the wedding. But I did send a gift. A single engraved key in a velvet box. On the tag, I wrote, "For when you realize you've built your own prison." I heard later that Daniel quit his job, that Maya had started drinking, that they'd become the kind of people who smiled too hard at parties. I didn't feel joy when I heard it. Just a strange, quiet ache. Like listening to a song you used to love, now off-key. People called me successful, powerful, unbreakable. But when the noise faded, and the last light in Aurelia went out each night, I knew the truth. I hadn't built a monument to victory. I'd built a mausoleum for everything I lost. And sometimes, when the city is silent, I swear I still hear that laugh, the one that started it all, echoing faintly down the mirrored halls. It doesn't hurt anymore. Not exactly. It just reminds me that every masterpiece has a ghost somewhere inside it. And mine has too.